Welcome everyone to the Week 13 edition, the Tuesday edition, and the pre-Thanksgiving, pre-holiday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Waiver Wire Edition podcast here. Jake Letarski, Joe Bartel, giving a lot of additions for some reason for this show, and 0 teams on bye. We've survived Bye-Mageddon Part 1, Jake. Of course, Week 14 presents another 6 teams on bye as you are hopefully not clawing for the fantasy playoffs, very, very much secured things, but it'll be a headache next week. We're not talking about next week, though. We're talking about this weekend, throwing in a Thursday game, a Black Friday game. You have Sunday and Monday, lots in store from a football perspective. And I think at least there's a few capable waiver wire options, some new ones that have emerged due to injuries of the past 24 hours, 48 hours or so. So we'll get to all that more. Let's hit the music. Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday, November 26th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. You can follow Jake at RotoJake. Diving into the top waiver wire pickups as always. Well, I guess not last week, but Jake, you're giving me your top 5 waiver wire guys. I'm going to throw mine in there. We'll have some discussion with these two because I think there's a point to say that depending on shallower formats or deeper formats, we're exceeding 10-plus names of guys you want to consider. And like I said last week, there are people who were dropped Thursday, Friday that I think from Bye-Mageddon Part 1 last week that matter in the fantasy lexicon. So let's get to who's your top option.
Yeah, so just like you said, building off of last week, Joe, check last week's drops, go through last week's transactions. There's going to be some players that were dropped that will be better than the names that we bring up. We're going to try to find new names that are under our 50% Yahoo threshold. But of course, there are definitely leagues, and each league is unique. Each team has a unique situation where they're going to be dropping guys that were 60, 70, 80% rostered in different leagues, and they will be better pickups than what we have to offer here. We do have a lot of pickups to go through, and we're ready to rock and roll here. And I'm going to start my list with the Monday Night Football special here. I actually put Gus Edwards from the LA Chargers, number 1 on my list. He's only 26% rostered. He was the name we brought up a little bit last week. Yes. And granted, he didn't have the most efficient rushing day. He still scored a touchdown on Monday Night Football. But the key thing here is J.K. Dobbins left the game before the first half with a knee injury. It looked like he got rolled up on a little bit. He left the game, went to the locker room, did not come out for the second half, did not return for the game. We know, the telecast, I think, mentioned that Dobbins has played 9 games in the last 3 years or something along those lines because of multiple knee injuries and that Achilles injury. This guy has a long, extensive history. And as of right now, I've been refreshing his page, trying to get news before the show. We don't really have any more information on J.K. Dobbins, on what happened here. And that might be a little bit concerning. But in any case, we'll see. Gus Edwards stands to be RB1 over there. I'm definitely looking to grab him as well. Yeah, there are guys like Kimani Vidal. I'm not really that interested in Hassan Haskins. There are some other players that might get into the mix eventually. I think we'll give Kimani Vidal a better chance down the stretch. And down the stretch, by the way, is at Atlanta, at Kansas City, tough matchup. Then at Tampa Bay, then versus Denver, tough matchup. At New England in the finals here. So there's some good matchups and some duds out there. Maybe he's not an every week plug-in the rest of the way out, but he is RB1, and he is absolutely worth adding. So that's number 1 for me.
I'll stop you right there because I think this is worth talking about further. It appeared like the injury didn't seem serious. There wasn't any
he got rolled up on, his leg got bent and the guy was under him and he moved a little bit. There was no straight up angle of the knee popping or anything like that. Let me make that clear. But
so you were running awkward through the rest of the season schedule. It's like, well, hold on. I don't know if it's warranted to that degree with whatever this Dobbins injury is.
Yeah, I guess I just I think of Dobbins' injury history here, and right now the Chargers are a playoff team. Let's see. So maybe running through the rest of the season schedule is too aggressive, but it's been rare down the stretch for the last 4 or 5 shows, Joe, to find a running back that's at this 25% rostered that is actually going to be, a top priority ad. So I want to throw that out there. Last week was Bye-Mageddon. I had to start Dylan Laubin. 1 week I started Keaton Mitchell and just nonsense out there for you here. But so this will keep things going. Hopefully a little less painful here.
So Edwards is your number 1 on the list, and that's fine. I guess I want to just interject that Vidal is my number 1 of the list. And you're going to see a lot of people talk about Gus Edwards and falls into the category immediately as the starting running back for the Chargers, and all that's true. And last night, again, we're doing this Tuesday, so Monday's game against the Ravens, Gus Edwards got X amount of carries, and then there's Hassan Haskins. Typically, when the three running backs, Dobbins, Edwards, and Hassan Haskins are all healthy, Vidal is a healthy scratch.
Yep.
We saw a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, when Edwards is out, Vidal was the guy that filled in over Hassan Haskins. And Hassan Haskins last night, I think this is the key, was used as the receiving back. That is not a receiving back guy. Like, he's getting goal line carries and then the receiving back. That's not at all what Hassan Haskins is supposed to be to that offense. I think Gus Edwards does his usual role, maybe gets 2 or 3 more carries, but the carries and, more importantly, the pass catching opportunity go to Vidal. So for this week, I mean, again, no team's on bye. Maybe it doesn't even matter. And we don't even know if Dobbins will or will not play. But if Dobbins is out, I think Vidal, almost 1-for-1, just takes the Dobbins' workload.
I'm just not as sold on 10, 15 snaps for Vidal making enough to be fantasy relevant here. I do agree that there's long-term upside here, but, theoretically, Vidal should have had his chance earlier this season, and not much, came of that.
Yeah, but he was doing it in the role of Gus Edwards. What if I'm telling you he's going to get 30 to 35 snaps?
Then things would be interesting. I just have a tough time believing it. That's all. Joe is the Chargers beat writer for the site. If anything, you should listen to him and this alignment more than me here. But I'm kind of a show me guy in this situation here, and I haven't seen it quite yet with Vidal. But sure, you're in deeper leagues. You need pickups. You need stashes. There's bench. Somebody got hurt. What have you? Here, go ahead. Use one on Vidal, and maybe that turns into something.
All right. Keep going with your list.
Countdown's going to continue. This one, I always put a couple kind of cheaty ones on here, and this one isn't cheating because it's below our threshold. But I put Keon Coleman of the Buffalo Bills on here. He's only 43% rostered on Yahoo, and this is someone that could be a legitimate wide receiver 3. Now, the reason he's 43% is because he missed 2 games with a wrist injury, and then he had his bye week. But now he's back, and he should be good to go the rest of the way out here. I think it's a pretty decent schedule coming up. The Rams, 49ers, Lions, Patriots. I mean, 49ers are the toughest one of the bunch. Otherwise, the highest is 22 again. Well, yeah, but the Lions also, they're ranked 27 against opposing receivers because people catch up to or get some garbage time. There are reasons for these numbers, but in any case, Keon Coleman, I think, is even after the acquisition of Amari Cooper, who has fallen really in the depth chart there in the snap share and all of that. I think Coleman comes back and gets a role. The post buy for rookies. If you believe in that, and he definitely showed us what he could handle early on in the season. So I'm keeping an eye on Keon Coleman. I think he could elevate him to wide receiver 3 would be a possibility, maybe even higher here. The rest of the season here. Then number 3, another running back I think could pick you up right away and help. That's Jeremy McNichols of the Washington Commanders. We have seen McNichols vulture a couple touchdowns early on here, and if you look at the 2 backs in Washington, and both of them are dealing with injuries. Austin Eckler was knocked out in kind of a shocking thing on the field. Yeah. And it was his 2nd concussion of the year. We were talking before the show, man, if that was a quarterback, people would talk about him like Tua because he has a pretty extensive head injury list. And we both agree, nothing official yet, but pretty safe to say we can rule him out for this week's game. Then you have Brian Robinson, who left in the first half, came back, then left permanently with the game. He's dealing with an ankle injury. Either way, if both of those guys are out, you could say Jeremy McNichols is the number 1 pickup this week, for sure. Maybe Brian Robinson tries to tough it out. He's definitely been through worse here. So we'll see there. But McNichols is only 1% rostered. You can basically grab him everywhere. Again,
he's your Amir Abdullah pickup this week.
Exactly.
Like if you have both Alexander Madison and Zamir White cleared for the Raiders, they play Friday. You're trying to find a pivot for a 1 week continue on streaming running backs. I do think that's fair with Jeremy McNichols.
Yeah. So the question in the chat, McNichols over Tracy at flex right now, talking Tyrone Tracy of the Giants who play the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. That's a real tough call here because the Commanders, I don't believe, are playing until Sunday, so we won't know the status of Brian Robinson. Now, if Brian Robinson comes out Wednesday and doesn't practice at all, you could possibly make that switch. I think you could do McNichols there, but I think your default option has to be Tracy, and you're going to need more news to tell you otherwise to put you in that direction.
I think that's pretty clearly Tracy in my mind for 2 factors. It sounds like, one, Tommy DeVito was injured in that loss to the Buccaneers and might not play.
Without a specific injury listed, he's just a little banged up.
Yeah, well, and it's not like his other. It's not his throwing arm, but his other arm. But Dable didn't feel confident saying Tommy DeVito could play Thursday. That's a good thing in my mind. Drew Lock is a better quarterback. So because Drew Lock, the better quarterback, is going to be playing offense against that bad Cowboys defense, Tracy's more prime. Now, I wish Tracy would be more involved as a receiver, but that's actually a good thing. The other part of this too, and it's why Jeremy McNichols, spoiler, does not make my top 5 list. Chris Rodriguez has been a practice squad call-up and often other rotated running back in for them. Rodriguez is a really good running back in his own right and will do the ball carrier stuff. And McNichols will be the Austin Eckler replacement and get a few more carries. So it's not just McNichols as the lone guy in the backfield. Chris Rodriguez, who is good, will also get some factoring in too.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that McNichols has the Titans this week, who's 13th against opposing running backs.
Shut down Joe Mixon first time all year.
Yeah, exactly. Joe Mixon has worst game of the year this past week for sure. And then after that, they have a bye week. And then after that, it's at New Orleans, who's 28 against opposing backs. But like, I don't know about Eckler being ready yet, but at least Brian Robinson should be ready by then. And with the bye week upcoming, maybe that is a good reason to rest Brian Robinson. But in any case, yes, Jeremy McNichols, my number 3 pickup of the week. Number 4, I can't really deny this guy any longer. Nick Westbrook-Akine of the Titans, 12%. He scored a touchdown in 6 of 7 weeks now. You have to imagine touchdown regression is coming at some point. And of course, now that I actually make him a pickup candidate, he's probably around, but he's only 12% rostered. I've been forced to start him in a lot of weeks. The one downside with Westbrook-Akine, and I wrote down on here, he has 2 or less catches 5 times during that 7-week stretch. So the volume's not there. He's just getting volume when it's key. Now on the bright side, he is out there on the field a lot. He's technically been out there on the field more than Calvin Ridley has, but Calvin Ridley rightfully gets more of the opportunities there. So Westbrook-Akine at 12%. He definitely makes the list here. And then number 5 for me, I basically put Oakland running backs, and this is a tough situation because you're going to have to wait and see to some degree. Madison is 48% rostered. Amir Abdullah is 25% rostered. Zamir White is 23% rostered here. And we basically just have to see, like with Madison and White still a little banged up, which one's going to play. So you dial in on that backfield. No, it's not a great matchup. No, the Raiders' offense is bad. Gardner Minshew broke his collarbone. We're getting Aiden O'Connell back this week. But, you know, when you have a starting running back set to get around a 60% snap share, that is fantasy relevant, and that's why they close up my list at number 5.
Yeah, and both Zamir White and Madison were doubtful listed Friday, ruled out Saturday, and you have the revenge game for the Chiefs. Of course, the Raiders beat the Chiefs on Christmas last year, primetime game, different holiday of sorts, but Chiefs favored by 12.5. If it's Aiden O'Connell as your quarterback, the answer might be 0 of the Raiders running backs, even if it's clearly Amir Abdullah, but Abdullah has some value as the pass catching guy, as we saw this past week. All right, so number 1 for me was Kimani Vidal. Again, if Dobbins is out this week against the Falcons, I think Vidal almost 1-for-1 just takes the snaps of Dobbins, splits the carry opportunities with Gus Edwards, and Hassan Haskins does special teams, goal line stuff.
Will you do a bet like a Edwards versus Vidal fantasy points bet?
I will do a touches bet because, like, I think Vidal will out touch Gus Edwards. I think Edwards could fall into the end zone. That's and then Vidal is out of it. But like, I think Vidal will out touch Gus Edwards. Is that fine?
Okay, I'll make that bet. Sure, I think Gus Edwards gets more touches, receptions plus carries, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
We're not doing any kick return stuff. Vidal, I guess, could, but yeah, receptions plus carries. I think Vidal.
Kick returns. Austin Eckler concussion. Wasn't it on a kick return?
If it was an onside kick thing where he got schmucked. I don't think it was like a kick return per se, but
anyway,
I forget. Yeah. I just see Eckler getting scraped off the ground and not really recalling how that occurred.
I don't know. I can't wait to indulge in a Culver's double bacon butterburger deluxe next
week. Been we haven't done a Culver's board bet in a long time, but I'm very happy that we get to bust this out on my team, the Chargers. It will be very embarrassing if I
our number 1 versus number 1 pick here. Yeah, we're just kind of on opposite sides of the aisle on this one, but fair enough. Hopefully you can look at the touches and make your own call. I will say that I'm making a board bet against the Chargers beat writer, the person at RotoWire that probably watches the Chargers more often than anyone. So again, we'll have to see.
I mean, it all depends on if Dobbins is actually able to play. Well, then you're going to win that by default because Gus Edwards will have a role.
Yeah, if Dobbins is active, then the bets we can avoid the bet.
All right, that's fine. Moving over to my next one, I listed the Raiders running backs as well, and I think likely it's Amir Abdullah again. Chiefs fair by 12.5. There's some, I would say, revenge factor that the Chiefs will be playing with another primetime game against this divisional team who is about as toothless as it gets. I think the Raiders were already a bad team. From Gardner Minshew to Aiden O'Connell is an even worse downgrade. And I would assume Amir Abdullah in that scenario gets some junk time production. Talking about people in the chat, whether it be Jeremy McNichols or Tyrone Tracy or Amir Abdullah over Tyrone Tracy, I would rather have Tyrone Tracy. Like I think that's a better player, better situation. But if you are in a pinch, and maybe you're not, there shouldn't be that many injuries and nobody on bye. I do think Jeremy McNichols and to a certain extent Amir Abdullah, both those guys kind of qualify in that range. I would have both behind Vidal if Dobbins is out, but need to be mentioned. Then I threw my cheapies in there. Guys I mentioned from a waiver wire perspective that could be cut from last week. Tajay Spears for the Titans and Zach Charbonnet for the Seahawks, both right around 40% rostered on Yahoo. So in 10-team leagues, I think they're backups that are available. I'm picking both up because in a scenario in which Tony Pollard for the Titans or Kenneth Walker for the Seahawks gets injured, you're talking about running back 24 immediately. I mean, they're very clear start and sit options.
Yep, better than anyone we've talked about so far. Yeah, so I agree that, those guys should probably be rostered if you can afford to.
Yeah, and then those are in shallower leagues. And Wan'Dale Robinson also fits that criteria for me, under 50% rostered. If DeVito is out against the Cowboys, Wan'Dale Robinson benefits extremely, I think, with Drew Lock as your quarterback. And even still, from a full-point PPR perspective, Wan'Dale Robinson's been averaging about 10 per game. You can do a whole lot worse, under 50% rostered. I don't think Tommy DeVito or Drew Lock really changed the outcome. It's Malik Neighbors who's going to get fed the ball this week because he complained, and Wan'Dale Robinson that's going to get some work too. And then finally, our cover boy, shockingly, barely makes our top 10 list, Dontayvion Wicks. If you need a plug and play this week, you could do worse than the Packers receiver. Romeo Doubs had a concussion against the Niners, likely not playing Thursday in the short week.
Yep.
I would assume Wicks skills in, and he's had the dropsies all of this season, but he did have a 24-point fantasy game early this week in a scenario where Dobbs was out. So I think Wicks is kind of an interesting option. You would have to give me the start set options.
I mean, I don't know. Malik Heath and Tucker Kraft got the touchdowns this week.
And Heath was a one-on-one single coverage fade in the end zone when they were up 21 points. And Tucker Kraft is always going to be schemed with those touchdowns in the red zone. So that doesn't really look negative on Wicks. It's just that Wicks has to catch passes. If he catches passes, he'll do fine. He's just been dropping a lot. Dolphins defense, not very good. And this is a game in Lambeau, which projects to be cold. I think I saw Tua is 0-7 in games that are under 40 degrees Fahrenheit at kickoff. I don't know if that matters. I think those are sometimes fluky stats, but Wicks and the passing game need to be good because I think it's going to be a lot of offense from the Packers and Dolphins matchup. So our top 10 list, I guess, combined, some combination of the Chargers running backs. Jake and I differ, whether it's Gus Edwards or Vidal. We also mentioned the Raiders running backs, Amir Abdullah. It's certainly possible Alexander Madison remains in that mix too if he's cleared to play. Jeremy McNichols is an interesting option along with Chris Rodriguez in super deep leagues for the Commanders, with at least Austin Eckler for sure, we'd assume, out, and possibly Brian Robinson too, with the Commanders by week 14. Then we have Westbrook-Akine, Wan'Dale Robinson. We have also talked about Dontayvion Wicks too. And then check your waivers. If Tajay Spears or Zach Charbonnet are out there, they're worth pickups as well too. Exhaustive. Exhaustive list.
Exactly. Check again, and most importantly, if you're just joining us, run through the transactions from last week. See who got cut. There's a better than zero chance that somebody better than all the names we mentioned got cut this week. So make sure you don't miss them, and that could warrant a bigger dump your fab high waiver priority. However your league does it. Cool.
All right, let's take a word from our sponsors here, Blue Wire. Okay, we're back and talking quarterback position. Real quick in the chat, I see a lot of start-sit stuff. We're a waiver wire dedicated show. I don't really have the bandwidth during the show itself. You could certainly message us at JB Fantasy Sports or at Jake Letarski on Twitter. But otherwise, Jim Coventry every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern on this very network goes through as many start-sit questions as possible. Otherwise, Jim Coventry, NFL, I'll keep touting our guy because he's fantastic with the start-sit stuff on Twitter as well.
It's also Tuesday, and we don't know the full story yet. It's real hard to get these questions for sure on Tuesday. If you ask one about a player that's relevant to what we're talking about, chances are we'll get to it. But the ones out of the blue, we got to stay on track. So sorry if we don't get to your question. But anyway, moving on to quarterbacks, right?
Yep, exactly. Go ahead for it.
Exactly. So first, I just want to mention Kirk Cousins is down to 59% rostered after last week's bye week. Again, one of these players that wouldn't normally we talk about, but possibly in the mix, and pretty decent rest of season schedule. It's versus the Chargers, who are 15th against opposing quarterbacks. Then at Minnesota, 22, at Las Vegas, 25, versus the Giants, 19, and at Washington, 14. So basically 0 top 13 defenses the rest of the season for Kirk Cousins. That makes him interesting. Another one, Caleb Williams, just above our threshold at 54%, but he's been steady with the new offensive coordinator. I mean, 28 fantasy points last week is basically his best since week 6. At Detroit for the early Thanksgiving game this week, not really much of a history there, of course. But you never know. They're going to be in comeback mode. They're going to have to throw. I guarantee you the defense will not stop the offense. If the offensive line can keep Caleb Williams upright for just a tiny bit, he could have a pretty good game here. So those are the standalone options. Obviously, last week we talked about Anthony Richardson. He's still in play. Bo Nix, he's still in play. If you can go out and grab them. But really, the thing is this week is quarterbacks, no buys, right? So chances are you got your guy. And in that case, I list some of the streamers. Russell Wilson, 36% at Cincinnati. Maybe if Trevor Lawrence comes back, 36% versus Houston. Aaron Rodgers is 35% versus Seattle. I don't know if he's mentally checked out or not. Drake May, 19% as versus the Colts. That's a little bit interesting. If you have to stream, he could be around even in 2 quarterback leagues. Out on Jameis Winston against Denver.
Yep.
Not really interested in Derek Carr, Will Levis. The Tommy DeVito, Cooper Rush Thanksgiving matchup. Interested in neither. I actually saw Bryce Young was available in my 2 quarterback league. He's only 5% rostered, and he's got Tampa Bay, who's been woeful on defense this year. My dilemma there is, do I put in a bid for Bryce Young to start him over Russell Wilson at Cincinnati? I don't think that is that's really enough for me to do. So that's really what we're looking at in terms of single quarterback or streamers here. Gets a little juicier in the 2 quarterback league. Not really though. I just teased it there. But Gardner Minshew out for the season, like we mentioned, broken collarbone. Desmond Ridder entered the game for him, but Aiden O'Connell, remember he broke his thumb a few weeks back. He's expected to be back from the IR this week and play on Black Friday against Kansas City. Officially designated for return. Looks like that's going to happen. I think in the Giants, we touched on this already, but Tommy DeVito started last week for Daniel Jones. Of course, that was after showtime. He's also banged up with an undisclosed injury. They're not really reporting. I'm not exactly sure how we get away with that these days, but in any case, Drew Lock is the backup there if that happens. I don't know if that's any more likely to happen than it was a couple days ago. I guess that's a situation to monitor. And then, of course, last week at Showtime, we didn't know that Brock Purdy was actually at risk of missing the game. He got ruled out late last week with a shoulder injury. I think they kind of expect him to be back week 13 here, but if not, it's Brandon Allen again.
I guess it's a spoiler. I do a love-hate video on the RotoWire YouTube channel every Friday, but I record it either Tuesday or Wednesday. With the holidays, I try to get it to the editors a little bit earlier. I kind of go off on Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. If you want to check it out, Friday, I'll tweet it out as well, 2JB Fantasy Sports. I'm pissed at the 49ers. I mean, you talk about the quarterbacks overall. I understand that there's not a whole lot of options. Effectively, it's the Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold range. Would you play those guys over Russell Wilson or any of the streamers? My answer is yes. So it's why I'm taking a diversion on this answer. The Niners pissed me off this whole season, and I'm super, super annoyed with the Brock Purdy circumstance. I said jerked around in the video. Maybe I can't say that. Maybe Mason's going to edit it out. But we got jerked around with this Christian McCaffrey nonsense for at least 2 weeks before the season, a month afterwards. They did that baloney with Deebo Samuel and his pneumonia, and I don't know what his snaps are going to look like. And now they're doing this with Brock Purdy. We recorded the podcast last Tuesday. Brock Purdy at that point was totally fine. It's minor shoulder injury, not a big deal. He practices Thursday, tries to throw the football, according to some reporters, can't throw it more than 5 yards, leaves, and then they said that's part of like scheduled maintenance. F off with that. Stop. Like, that's so stupid that we have to pretend as if John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan at all have any word or care about what we have to say. I don't know if he plays this week. If it is as serious as it was reported Thursday that he couldn't throw the ball more than 10 yards, why is he even playing rest of the season, much less next week? I don't know how that gets better. I don't think it's a normal thing. And I think it's very troubling if you're invested in Juwan Jennings or Deebo or anything.
If things were going better for the Niners this year, this honestly had to feel like, oh, it's a punt game. We're going to go to Lambeau. We're not going to play our guys, and we're not going to give much away and give them some false confidence to eventually see them in the playoffs, because this is how it always happens. I was at Lambeau on Sunday. It felt electric, like a playoff game. There's a lot of 49ers hate in that building, and it was all coming out before game, after the game, just a lot of that going on. Anyway, sidetrack though. The Niners are 5-5 going into this week. They're 5-6 now. Granted, there will be a team with a 500 or below record from the NFC in the playoffs here, but man, you can't really lose a whole lot more games and expect to be a shoo-in and not fight until the final week, San Fran. So, I can't say that they were punting it for a rest game. It has to be somewhat serious. So, we'll see on that. I was surprised to see that situation in the first place. Don't really know what's going on there, but it is what it is. Also, watch who signs Daniel Jones, I guess.
Yeah. No.
I don't know. There are some teams that he might actually play and be better than Brandon Allen or Tommy DeVito or even Cooper Rush. I always think it'd be funny if the Giants if the Cowboys signed him.
Nobody else
to play
needs to
on
be watching the
Thanksgiving.
Cowboys Giants game unless Daniel Jones plays for the Cowboys. I
heard Dallas fans are trying to boycott it just to send Jerry a message. I've heard there's some of that going around.
Good. They
have
should.
Nobody show up for the early Thanksgiving game, and yeah.
It's ridiculous. No, that would be great. He wants to go to a playoff contender. Our guy Mario Puig had tweeted this out, as did other people. But it's like, who gave Daniel Jones the right to demand where he goes? Like, this guy that's got a below 500 record as a starter in 4 of his 5 seasons gets to decide he gets to a playoff team. No, it's not how it works.
Well, he didn't
should have to go play for the
waivers,
Raiders.
so now he gets to make a choice, right?
Yeah, because he had a $40 million contract erroneously given to him by a GM that wanted to protect his job. But no, it's Daniel Jones should be the quarterback for the Raiders, and then I'll care. Otherwise, if he's the backup for the Dolphins, whatever. Don't even talk about Daniel Jones the rest of the season. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
I'm fired up, Jake. It's the holiday season. I'm fired up.
The Shanahan thing, I think, got us all a little.
I'm so upset at that. I had recommended Juwan Jennings as a love last week. I had picked the Niners in my big betting sheet I do to beat the Packers or at least to cover the spread. And if I had known that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch would just wuss out on giving us any information on Brock Purdy whatsoever, it would have been a very clear win, as it was the case when the Packers trounced that stupid team from San Francisco. So, yes.
All right, you want to get a read in before we do running backs?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for keeping me on task, Jake. The end of the season is getting closer. Thank God for the Niners, at least. Catch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim and Circa Resort Casino in Las Vegas. 6 temperature-controlled pools, a massive 143-foot screen, and booming game sound, plus view the pyrotechnics and visual effects throughout the game. Grab the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Stadium Swim's big game viewing party, February 9th, only at Circa Resort and Casino. Space is going fast. Reserve your spot today at circalasvegas.com. In our top 10 waiver wire pickup between you and I, we both picked 5. We listed a number of running backs. So I think, again, the obvious situation, monitor what's happening with the Chargers. If Dobbins is healthy, Kimani Vidal has 0 impact whatsoever. Yep. Gus Edwards, like a fringe flex play. He could fall into the end zone. That's about it. But if Dobbins is out, that whole situation changes for Los Angeles.
And if you fast forwarded it here because of the timestamps to hear us talk about running backs, just go back to the beginning of the show because the meat and potatoes of the running backs are discussed there. Gus Edwards, Jeremy McNichols is discussed a lot, with the whole Eckler, Brian Robinson injury situations here. He's a very interesting play here if he ends up getting that backfield to himself or even partially to himself. The Amir Abdullah, Zamir White, Alexander Madison, all 3 of those are under 50%. Go grab the one that's starting. And, so we talked about McNichols. As far as new names, I didn't really have a whole lot. I wanted to note that Jalen Wright has basically surpassed Raheem Mostert as RB2 in Miami behind Devon Achane. But he's not productive, but he still gets some touches here. So, maybe he moves up the handcuff rankings a little bit if that's how you want to play it here. I also wanted to note that we mentioned Jonathan Brooks was coming back last week. A lot of people have been holding on to him, 56%, I think. Didn't even really make our threshold here. Just had 2 carries in his debut. Remember, Miles Sanders on ankle.
5 snaps total.
Yep, exactly. Miles Sanders is on IR with an ankle injury. And Chuba Hubbard basically got all of the work. And the thing that makes this interesting this week is they face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are 25th against opposing running backs in half PPR formats. I understand wanting to ease Jonathan Brooks in lightly. Hopefully he's been around and got some practices into, so he kind of gets it here. But you want to see what you got in your guy instead of maybe running out Chuba Hubbard. We'll see.
Spoiler for my love-hate video, I am not at all interested in Jonathan Brooks, and I think Chuba Hubbard is once again a play. There's going to be a point in time where that becomes like a 60-40 split or 65-35, but it's not this week against the Buccaneers.
If you waste the roster spot on him now, you're not going to get to the point in time where it matters.
Right? Oh, you're already well out of it if you waste a roster spot on Jonathan Brooks.
Okay, and then one more running back note I had. This is before Caught this right before the show, but I was wondering and looking through my box scores here as I was driving back from the Packer game, or passenger seat back from the Packer game, of course, on the phone. Anyway, yeah.
Very good that you clarified that. Thanks, Jake.
I don't need any any complaints, any side nonsense here. But anyway, I was wondering what the heck happened to Ramondre Stevenson, and he had pretty much one of his worst games of the year. And he was around a 40% snap share, and Antonio Gibson had a 44% snap share, which was his largest role since week 6. Gibson also only had one less touch, so
could be game script. The Pats are blown out basically from the rip. One of their 2 touchdowns was a defensive play, and then the other one came at the very late part of the contest. But you're right. I mean, that's something to monitor.
Jerry notes this in his box score breakdown, and it wasn't just a product of garbage time. I'm sure it contributed, a little bit more, but Ramondre Stevenson had 57% of snaps and 10 of 16 running back opportunities before the fourth quarter, which isn't as bad as the full game rates would lead you to believe here. Whereas Gibson, it was 5 straight games under 40 or 20% snap share and 5 or fewer touches. Suddenly it came in. So yes, garbage time had something to do with it. Didn't have everything to do with it here. And, Ramondre Stevenson, 8 carries for 13 yards. Gibson, 6 carries for 31 yards. Both were targeted twice. Gibson was the only one to catch a pass. That's interesting. That's a trend worth noting, if we're really digging for backs here. But yeah, you're looking at Gus Edwards, Kimani Vidal, Jeremy McNichols, and the Raiders backfield situation. If you're in need of a streamer this week, if you're just looking to fill a roster spot, Joe, I completely agree with you. You're looking at Charbonnet, you're looking at Tajay Spears, you're looking for Blake Corum, even.
Trey Benson's the world, yeah.
Trey Benson, yeah. Braylon Allen's kind of fallen down those handcuff rankings a little bit with how bad the Jets have been, but yeah. So those are the guys you're looking for before rushing to pick up, Antonio Gibson, and Jonathan Brooks, if you don't need a starter this week. So really, that's all the running back situation is at.
I also cut Raheem Mostert in a 12-team league when I had some roster construction issues.
Yep.
That's totally fine with Jalen.
And I bet you're not rushing to pick him back up.
No, I mean, I have enough of those Zach Charbonnets and Tajay Spears that one of them is going to hit a home run. I don't think it's Mostert, so that's entirely a fail. Again, for those of you just tuning in or if you're listening to the podcast, whatever, live, we talk about the situation more in depth with the Chargers backfield, the Commanders backfield, and Raiders backfield, which primarily, again, while we're recording this Tuesday, we have a lot of information. That's where your waiver wire gems are going to lie from the running back position.
With the big highlight being Joe and I's board bet. If J.K. Dobbins is out, I think Gus Edwards gets more touches. He thinks Kimani Vidal gets more touches. Joe is the Chargers beat writer, just to put the asterisk there. So, yeah, let's do it. Hopefully one of us is going to be eating double cheeseburgers on the other next week.
I'm looking forward to it. Let's also hear from our guy, Nick Whalen, who's been crushing it in the Scott Fish Bowl, one of the top scorers, I think, certainly of the RotoWire contingency, and has been great in most of the leagues that I've been in, unfortunately, because I have to compete with him. But let's hear from Nick Whalen here.
We're proud to be brought to you by DraftKings Pick 6. So many NFL offerings each week over at Pick 6. Been enjoying playing on the Pick 6 platform each and every week of the NFL season. Think a certain quarterback will throw for more than 300 yards. How about your favorite receiver scoring a touchdown? Check out Pick 6, the newest way to play fantasy football and win cash right now with DraftKings. Here's how it works. Just pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. Yards, catches, touchdowns, etc. Lock in those picks and compete against opponents for a shot at huge cash prizes. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use our code ROTOPICK. That's ROTOPICK. Again, ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. If you're a new Pick 6 customer, play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Just use that code ROTOPICK. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-89-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
We're back, and again, love that DraftKings Pick 6. I was just checking. Nick Whalen had the overall #1 score in the Scott Fish Bowl Week 1 playoff rankings, 275 points, Jake. That's an insane 275 points. Overall point score 1. Let's see if Nick can end up winning it all in the Scott Fish Bowl, represent the RotoWire brand quite a bit. Loving, I mean, he's been fantastic in every league I've been in. It's been very frustrating. I like to tell myself that I helped him because he and I did the offseason podcasts and
There you go.
bounced our ideas all together. And so Nick made my teams better, but I definitely made Nick's the juggernauts that we've seen it elsewhere. Jake's shaking his head. Yeah, that's totally fair. Again, moving over to the receiver spot for waiver wire pickups, you have Westbrook Akine among your top 5. We had both listed Keon Coleman as a guy that maybe been waiver wire drop candidate fire too. Yep. I like the call on Noah Brown who you have in our spreadsheet, especially if Eckler and Brian Robinson are out. The Commanders probably have to pass more.
Exactly. We're going to need some targets here. It's time to get Jaden Daniels and the Commanders passing a little bit more. Noah Brown's only 10% rostered. Not a great matchup against Tennessee. Then, of course, a week 14 bye. But make no mistake, he is the wide receiver 2 in Washington. He had 10 targets this week, caught 6 of them for 79 yards. Granted, it's against the Cowboys defense that has been left a lot to be desired this year. But I feel like Noah Brown has to at least make the list. There are going to be some deeper formats where we throw him out there. Speaking of following the targets, Devon Vele, I guess you give him another shot. He's only 5% rostered. 9 targets this week, caught 6 of them for 80 yards here. That is worth a roster spot in a lot of the leagues that I'm in. So I wanted to throw that out there. Probably outside of consideration.
Second or third consecutive week without 8+ targets for they have the Browns Monday night, and I think that's a tougher matchup, but there's enough volume where
he's getting the ball plenty. So these guys, whether it's our 20-team dynasty rosters, I had to pick up Kevontae Turpin in a league this week. So
you are the king. Okay, so hold on, pause, Jake. For everyone listening, Jake is wonderful around the office. Everyone loves him. But I hear one negative thing about you, and that's typically from the tech guys who are talking about frequently. You are the king of picking up a random guy and getting some production that should never have otherwise happened. And it happens every single week. So, of course, you, of all people, get the kick return touchdown where he does a Madden spin move and bursts for 98 yards.
That was nasty.
You've got multiple Westbrook Akine touchdowns as well, too. You are the king of getting some random crap guy to score a touchdown.
However, in that particular league, Harry still beat me because Quentin Johnson got that drop. Harry beat me by 1.5. Quentin Johnson catches that ball late in the game Monday night that's right in his hands with nobody in front of him.
Oh, he dropped 3. Dropped 3 passes.
Okay, yes. Quentin Johnston, and I know he's a guy that we've hyped up. He's clearly getting the opportunities, not always executing a little bit here. In any case, good point in the chat, Scott. The Browns might not be as tough of a matchup on the on the road as they are at home.
In Denver, it's cold, the altitude. Like I do think that matters. Tough matchup isn't the right way of saying things. Yep. It's one that would make me a little bit lower on Bailey, despite the production that he's been given, or at least the opportunities.
Yeah. So again, moving on with these receivers here, I had Dontayvion Wicks on my list, just a little bit lower down on the list. Because Romeo Doubs has that concussion confirmed. Like he's going to be out with a short week. Wicks should get some more opportunities as the wide receiver 3 in that Green Bay offense here. Tough to tell the distribution. Love only threw the ball 23 times on Sunday. Dobbs got 6 of those targets. He was the leader, so there's some share to go around here. Nobody else had more than 3, which was Jaden Reed and Watson. So maybe back to Dontayvion Wicks there. There's a little bit of interest. He is our cover boy. I figured I'd mention him again. The other one that gets a little more interesting for me is Alec Pierce of the Colts. He's only 21% rostered. He's typically gets a couple of big plays. He's the opposite of these 8-9 target guys we're talking about. But Josh Downs has a right shoulder injury here. And Alec Pierce gets the Patriots next week. He was targeted 4 times, caught 1 for 39 yards against Detroit last week. And then, of course, he has a week 14 bye here. But again, there's going to be some formats where there's a little plug and play. And then I suppose in the same vein, a guy
I'm going to pause you real quick because I want to bring it up. And this is a conversation I do the big betting sheet every week.
Yeah, sure. Hit me.
We love here on the video Patrick Surtain, stud corner for the Broncos. I think he's super underrated. I think he's very clearly the best cornerback in the league. Outside of that, Christian Gonzalez, cornerback for the Patriots, is probably the second best cornerback or one of the best in the league. And with Josh Downs out, I think Michael Pittman plays a bit more slot. That's my guess. And we don't know if Josh Downs is out, but the assumption is week to week. When somebody says week to week, I think they're not at least playing this week. So if Josh Downs is out, Michael Pittman plays more slot. I don't think Christian Gonzalez travels to the slot, so he would then be matched up with Alec Pierce. If that's the case and it's Gonzalez on Pierce, that's like Darrell Revis level, completely isolated. There is not a play that I think Pierce makes if Gonzalez is on it. That's an if though, and something you should at least monitor.
Okay, so that's a risk we have to run. I've had a tough Michael Pittman versus Tyler Lockett decision for like the last bunch of weeks. And Tyler Lockett just gets into the conversation because I don't trust Pittman with Anthony Richardson as his quarterback here. But yeah, maybe I'll follow that story a little bit because I am going to have to play some Pittman this week as much as I don't want to here. And then the last name I had on the list, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, again, coming off the bye week here. He got down to 25% rostered. He's home against the Rams this week. Kind of a last man standing situation, kind of a big play dependent. Obviously, he had back-to-back weeks with a big touchdown leading up to his bye week. So, somebody else, if you want to take a deep swing, or like, maybe if you're if you're projected to be down a lot at this point and you need to take a big swing, MVS is a little more attractive than somebody like Vele or Brown who just gets volume. MVS is someone that could get big plays there. But that's my wide receiver list.
Against the Rams, it's certainly possible that the Rams will give up another big touchdown. I think that's fair. It's a difficult spot, but I think there's receiver options even with 0 teams on bye to look at. Let's move over to the tight ends. We've been talking about Jonnu Smith. I have a feeling our award show at the end of the year will have Kate Otten and Jonnu Smith as featured members of discussion when it comes to waiver wire pickups. Right now, though, I think there's actually a few guys specifically that you could probably still acquire yet and pay off dividends.
Yeah, we have a pretty good tight end week, which is definitely making me second guess here what I want to do with Kyle Pitts, for example, in a lot of my leagues here. I almost had him in my top 5, but eventually I bumped him out for McNichols. Only room for one commander on my top 5 list. But Zach Ertz, maybe it's changed by now, but yesterday when I was doing this outline, he's 48% rostered. He had, in his last 3 weeks, he's had 8, 7, and 8 targets. And then this week he was 6 for 38 with a touchdown here in week 12. So Zach Ertz is interesting. He's not sexy. He's not exciting here, but he has just as good of a chance as anybody in that 8 through 15 tight end tier to grab you 10 fantasy points. And, so there's definitely value in that here. I mentioned Jake Ferguson has a concussion. He's viewed as a long shot to play on Thanksgiving. And Luke Schoonmaker had another pretty good game, 3 or 4 targets for 55 and a touchdown. Would be in line to start again. And, of course, the week that Ferguson got hurt, Schoonmaker had 10 targets. So I am actually probably playing like a real life situation in a league where I probably need to win. I will be playing Schoonmaker over Pitts and probably cutting Pitts to pick up a kicker because I was projected to win by a lot last week in that particular league. I actually didn't play a kicker that week because I didn't want to cut Pitts, but now I'm probably just cutting Pitts for a kicker anyway here because I'll stream the rest of the way out. I don't see some big late season turnaround happening for Pitts necessarily. So that's how I value. I just want to contextualize how I personally value Schoonmaker and what he can do because he seems to be a guy Cooper Rush likes to throw to.
Yeah, and so it's a this week thing because if Ferguson comes back, we're not saying Schoonmaker has replaced Ferguson, right? That's fair.
He hasn't replaced Ferguson.
Okay,
so I will be looking for another streaming tight end the following week if I do in fact cut Pitts.
Okay, cool. That's where I'm at as well too. With Schoonmaker, who I think is actually kind of an interesting one. You and I do the NFFC. It's 20-man rosters, 12 team. We're entering the point of the year, and we haven't done this, and I think it's worth mentioning. Any of these guys that make sense for your roster, whether it be Zach Charbonnet or Tajay Spears or Vidal or Edwards, it's dump your budget on these guys' time. Like there's no reason to hold fab, I think, at this point. Really, or next week. Again, a lot of teams
I'd still hold $1 or $2 just so you can have an edge.
Okay. So can we talk strategy on that since the tight ends?
Yeah.
Is the idea that you want to have one more than the next most threatening person, if possible? So
yeah, that's a good one.
Like if you and I are in a competitive format, you and I both have 7-5 records, you have $5 left. I would want to make sure that whatever my fab this week is leaves me with 6 if it's all spent. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. I would say that because there aren't necessarily, unless you have such a roster or injury situation where you absolutely need a guy, there's not a dump everybody pickup this week unless it's somebody that was cut last week that is very good and you want for the rest of your season here. There's no standard name that you're dumping everybody on. So I'm thinking, you want to save enough to be competitive with those last couple teams. And it's a whole nother conversation of people that are out of the playoffs making transactions and stuff. Whether that's okay or not, that's a whole nother thing. But you realize you're only going to compete with 6 people and then 4 people,
right,
and then 2 people, and then one other person. Obviously, by the end, you're one of those 2. So
I think it's one of those. You and I have been doing the Waiver Wire show for a long time now, but also we've been doing it all season long. The Corums, the Trey Bensons, the Jalen Wrights, we've been talking about them for 4 or 5, 6 weeks. Now is the time where they're more valuable. Somebody was asking, do I keep Jordan Mason or Will Dissly in the chat, for example, and they have Trey McBride as your starter, my answer has always been there's never a point in the rest of the season and in the playoffs where you're benching Trey McBride. So Will Dissly, while valuable and blocks somebody else from possibly doing it, is like tight end 17 for me. I would rather have Jordan Mason in that instance, because if Christian McCaffrey goes down, you could arguably play Jordan Mason right away and don't have to fight waivers. So there's that strategy that needs to come in mind now at this point of the year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you always want to be able to block, someone that you're playing against in the semis or the championship too. You want to keep enough, if one of these guys goes down and suddenly somebody is an elite pickup, you want to at least be competitive to stop that from being the missing piece for your opponent here too. We did get a little sidetracked. I forgot to mention Noah Gray of the Chiefs in our tight end situation here. I don't love it. I don't think I'll be picking him up anywhere, but he does have 4 touchdowns in 2 games. He's the definition of a touchdown-dependent option. Obviously, he's sharing work with Kelsey, but they do run a lot of two tight end sets. And backup Peyton Hendershot also exited the game with a calf injury, if that makes any difference, for your outlook on Noah Gray there. But if you're looking if it's 0 PPR and you're hoping for a touchdown-only option, go grab Noah Gray, especially if the Chiefs run it up on the Raiders, which is possible this week. Maybe Gray gets a little extra work towards the end. So he's interesting, but I still prefer the steadier volume of guys like Schoonmaker or Zach Ertz if he's available, if you're in tight end streaming territory there.
Do you have any of the defensive guys? Like Jacksonville is a candidate against the Texans this week, and you could also go against the Titans. There's a bunch of defenses you picked up last week that you could also pick up this week too.
Yeah, well, so the thing is, there's nobody on bye, so you're not really streaming. I admittedly didn't look at the top 10 defenses and see if there's anyone you want to sit. I don't like to play that game a ton. I don't want to sit the number 4 defense in fantasy for one of these guys, but you could take either side of the Cowboys-Giants. It's a Cooper Rush DeVito Bowl. The over-under on that game is 37.5. I'd be a little more inclined to take I'll take the Cowboys defense at 30% rostered because they're a home team, but the Giants also, I don't know if this is held up, but they were leading the league in sacks as of a couple weeks ago. So you got that going for you. There will be turnovers in that game. So something to think about here. I threw the Commanders on here too. That's kind of cheating. They're 63% rostered on Yahoo, only 41% rostered on ESPN though, which I thought was a little weird. That was noted in Jerry's column today. Over under on that game is 43.5, and they're facing the Titans and Will Levis at home. One that I did want to bring up, though, because of, again, we're talking about tough drop decisions from last week. The Buffalo Bills, they're down to 63% rostered on Yahoo. They're a pretty solid defense overall. You can go grab them. They have the 49ers this week, which is very interesting if Brandon Allen's the quarterback again. Again, we don't know. Then it's the Rams and the Lions, which are not great, but they get the Patriots and the Jets in the playoff semis and the finals. I just wanted to throw that out there. We don't talk about defenses a ton, but to end the season with a Patriots team that is vying for a draft pick and a Jets organization that is in entire disarray, even if the Bills don't have to, sitting guys for the Bills won't be realistic because we're talking 16 and 17 and not 18 here, but Patriots and Jets to close the season for the Bills. That makes them probably the top overall fantasy defense if you're ranking it just on semis and finals here. I don't love carrying 2 defenses, and you probably don't want to start the Bills against the Lions. But
you said Patriots or Jets, right? For week 16,
it's Patriots in week 16, Jets in week 17.
Can I give you a different one? Because I actually did this already for our NFFC league.
Interesting. Let's go.
I have the Colts defense going against the Titans in week 16 and Giants in week 17.
Ooh, that's pretty good. That might be better.
And if you play in a week 18 league, they have Jacksonville week 18. Like, I think the Colts actually might be more attractive to me in that sort of scenario.
Interesting. I didn't expect to do this exercise, but I do like this exercise because I'm curious myself, and Joe definitely did the math. If you look at streaming defenses list too, I see a lot of people recommending Tampa Bay against Carolina. They're the road team. I'm not touching that. There's no reason you can do that if one of these other options is available or your OG defense is back on your roster.
And then the other one, again, not to deviate too much, but I also picked up the Bengals defense in week 15 against the Titans and week 16 against the Browns. So if you're playing a 2-week sample, you'd have to then cut the Bengals, I would assume, against the Broncos in week 17. But yeah, week 15 against Titans, week 16 against the Browns. I'm trying to get ahead of the curve because people are going to be doing this already. If not this week, you might be able to benefit from next week as well too, with 6 teams on bye. Some people might not be able to have a second defense. You can plan ahead. It's that very first round of the playoffs that isn't a very easy call. It doesn't line up for all 3 defense, but I think there's a few options for the semifinals, week 16, and finals in week 17. So
absolutely. All right. We ran through it all. Great job. We got you ready.
Covered it very well.
It's about playoff time. It's about playoff time here. You know, this is very important. I like to see. Normally the viewership drops off as people start giving up on their leagues, but thanks to our loyal listeners, followers, everything for sticking around and making the chat lively and keeping things interesting for us.
Yeah, tons of questions in the chat today. Really appreciate that. Honestly, thank you guys all the entire season. Like Jake said, we've had a fantastic listenership rate, or at least if I'm looking at the view count during our YouTube videos here,
just compared to last year, it's been a whole lot more. So
I know it's not us necessarily, Jake, but I like to tell myself that you guys, the listeners, are
a lot of it's the power of the channel and the other faces on here.
And the topic.
I'd like to think that we have a little something to do with it, but
yeah. I do as well. But
we'll be back with y'all next week.
Thanks everyone for listening. Best of luck to your teams this week, and also, of course, happy holidays if you're listening to this while driving. Stay safe. Lots of weather out there as well too, I'm sure. So hopefully having everyone back here, the nearly 1,000 people watching live again. Looking forward to getting you set for the playoffs, which are right around the corner.